All right, so welcome everyone to another installment of the MLS Hour. This week, we'd like to touch on, just an expansion of NAR's MLS COVID-19 guidance. And we'd like to touch on some of the areas that MLSs are encountering and members are encountering in their communications and their messaging out to those respective audiences. A lot has changed. Last week we talked about some of the changes within the MLS platform and some of the changes in business practices, such as moving over to a virtual environment, virtual showings, virtual open houses, and the like. And again, this week we thought we'd focus on the communications and the messaging aspect of the business on both sides of the MLS and on the member side. We have great panelists for you today. Joining Rodney and Charlie and myself are Will Burnham and Krista Knight. So we'll ask them to get it started and tell us a little bit about themselves. We'll start with Krista. Krista's with Becker Properties, so she's on the practitioner side. Krista, thank you for joining us, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I've been a realtor. I actually started as a coordinator in 2010. I've been a licensed realtor since 2014, and I moved from California to San Antonio in 2018. So I've been holding a dual license now for a couple years and getting the feel of Texas and everything consumer friendly here.
Very cool. And you currently manage the public relations side of things for your brokerage?
Yeah, so I handle our agent development, which works on our trainings and any kind of one-on-one that they're looking for also. And so I do that as well as practice real estate still.
Wonderful. And still have the connection to California and practice in both states you mentioned, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Also joining us, we have Will Burnham. First off, congratulations again, Will, to your new promotion at the MLS there. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your prior position. I think leans on pretty heavily on what we're talking about today, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And thank you for the congratulations. Yes, I'm the MLS supervisor at the Austin Board of Realtors, so overseeing Actress MLS in Central Texas. I've been an ABOR for over 7.5 years now, pushing 8 years, and on the MLS side for about half of that. As Renee alluded to, I was the MLS senior brand strategist for a few years before that, and come from just a marketing and communications background on both the association and the MLS side, so definitely jumped at the chance to talk about that a little bit. And of course, we're communicating in new and creative ways, and at the same ways too at the same time through all this. So I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I think you're muted, Renee.
There we go. I had to do it once on each webinar, right? To get us started, can each of you give us a sense for, what has changed? What maybe either business practices or communication practices have you had to change both at the MLS and at the brokerage level in response to the pandemic and maybe the challenges behind that? Will, can you start us off on that?
Sure, absolutely. So a lot's changed as it has for all of us. I mean, we're fully remote, but it hasn't changed in the sense that we're still trying to problem solve every day and try to solve problems for our members and realtors and communicate with them. But to cover what has changed, I mean, we're talking about something that I don't think anybody truly expected to ever talk about or have to talk about in this light. So it's a really interesting shared experience of we're all living through this together, but we have the same questions really. But so there's been a lot more honest engagement, honest communication. I think that was always there, but this is definitely a time to prioritize what is truly important about the services we provide and about the communications that we send out. And I think that that's really helped us kind of refocus on, definitely now as we're continuing this thing, but I know especially now as hopefully we start to get a little bit close to the norm, we're going to look back at our lessons learned and see, well, let's not just completely try to go back to the way it was, because I think a lot of positive things have come out of this that we need to learn from. So that's getting exciting to that point where we kind of hopefully start turning the corner and put a little bit of practice to what we've learned longer term.
Yeah, I would have to say, we already used Facebook as our brokerage, we have a private group that we utilize, but I think one-on-one conversations. So, just picking up the phone and calling our agents it's been amazing. Just getting responses from them and getting them, even when I just send an extra text message for an upcoming training, it's getting more responses from them that way also. And I think that he's right in the sense that it allows us to go back to the roots of, these connections that we have with people. And it gives us the time to formulate those relationships again. And I think that, one of the things we've tried to do at our brokerage is just explain to our agents, now is the time to be a resource for the community and for your clients and your sphere, your entire sphere, whether that's, someone that's serving you or someone that you're serving. So I think that that's probably the most positive impact we've seen.
Wonderful. And so not too long ago, right, maybe a couple of weeks back, you may have seen it on social media, and we may have joked about it with our friends, where there was like a couple of days where everyone emailed us, right? Every company imaginable gave us an update on what they were doing, and which is great, right? It reassured us and gave us some insight into what the various companies that we've done business with in the past have done to respond to the pandemic. But that's also a challenge, right? There seems to be a lot more noise, if you will, a lot of competing messages. We're all on, I'm sure as the rest of you are like me, where we're on webinars and these virtual meetings now a lot more than we were in the past. Can you tell us a little bit about, with all that information that's being published and the competing messages, maybe from a strategy perspective, what are you looking to employ, and how does that change your messaging today, and maybe the demand on the needs for information to be able to deliver to, from the MLS perspective and to your clients from the brokerage perspective?
Yes, I think that, one of the things we discussed was everyone stopped their auto marketing, none of those drip campaigns anymore. So that was the first thing we explained to our agents. And then also just utilizing one-on-one connections. So whether that was, FaceTime, I've instructed our agents, here's a goal for your day of 5 people to touch. And that's not through Facebook. That's picking up the phone, FaceTiming, doing a video message to somebody that's, personalized. Now is the time for them to be working on those types of engagements, so that when we do get back in front of just, the normal business, we are still in front of them and top of mind too, while providing some sort of resource now.
Yeah, I mean, same vein, and we absolutely had to put a pause to what we would normally consider marketing. It seems like an obvious thing at this time, but it was, when this was starting, it's like, well, how much is our normal really going to shift? And of course, as things started to move remote, it was pretty obvious that for at least, a month plus here, we're looking at a new norm. So that was an easy decision to pause those. And I think what's helped us a lot, and just how we have tried to communicate, is trying to do our best to not really, it's a fine line to walk, but not talk about how we're doing in this situation, but how are you all doing? What's going on in your everyday? What do you need from us? I mean, that was a very candid one-on-one conversation. Like, what can we do to help this out? But on the broader scale, those communications are so tricky because it goes out to, for us, almost 13,000 members, 15,000 subscribers, and they're all different and the same in these different ways. And so we just had to say, let us know what you need. And I think we got to a point where every communication we were sending was truly pulling from, here's an update you need to know. And here, and they were pretty rapid fire. We had, but it was the right thing to do. Of course, we'd like to be more strategic in terms of releasing those, but the strategy here was, we need to get this information as quickly as possible out to the people who need it, which is our members, and of course through them, the consumers. So anytime there was a local policy update, a statewide update, we prioritized getting that out. And I think we had, the numbers show we had really big success in open rates and click rates. And it showed us that, these relationships we've been building have paid off, because they are looking to the association, the MLS, for some guidance here. And while we may not have all the answers, we want to know the answers that we don't know, so that we can do our best to find that information.
Great. And Will, have you noticed a change of maybe the type of information that members are asking for out of the MLS, maybe in the last month or two after the orders came down and everyone was forced to work virtually? Or has that been pretty consistent even from before the pandemic?
Yeah, I don't think it's actually that different from kind of the normal questions we would ask in the MLS world. I mean, it's statistics. Everybody loves the stats and everybody loves to see what that's doing. And that's what realtors are so good at, contextualizing those numbers for their clients. And we do our best to say, here are the numbers, and what are the trends here? Let's work together to figure out. So I think that there was definitely an increased demand for that. And we did take a slightly proactive approach to send brokers, here's some numbers, talk with your agents about what this could mean. Let us know what numbers you want to see. We can adjust here, pendings, back on markets. So we've been pretty fluid and flexible with what that looks like, but so the numbers are always there. And then really just we need to do, and we being the MLS, need to do the best we can to work with our vendors who, we're always touting, use these products for this, use this product for that, use this service. We need to make sure we're walking the walk, and through us that those vendors are walking the walk too. So doing our best to make sure that those developments and new ideas, or even just remembering something old is there, are properly functioning and serving the people who need them.
Well, and just a quick follow-up on that, has your decision-making internally, as you're kicking around ideas on what information to put out and maybe the timing of it, has that decision process changed at all internally? Is it more streamlined? What maybe best practices, if you will, would you have others consider as they're kicking around their messaging and what pieces they're putting out to members?
Yeah, that's a great question. We go fully remote, and I've been joking, ironically, I feel as connected as ever to the team. And because we're not, even though we're in one building most of the time, it's separate floors, and now we're all doing quick calls like this. And it's a forward asking the question. And then I think we've been embracing, I saw this at a recent conference, but asking kind of the what if of the scenario and talking about, like, what if we did do that for this? Would that, whether yes or no, is that going to be helpful for anyone? And as we've been more comfortable regularly meeting and just exchanging those ideas, I think that a lot of the things we ended up with stemmed from that type of conversation. So it has changed in the sense that I think we're willing to think outside the box, which is not as exciting at the MLS. Doesn't mean it's super exciting, but it is different and new and still valuable for us. So it probably has streamlined, but not in the way I would have looked 3 months ago and thought, if I had say we're fully remote, I'd be like, well, things probably slowed down a ton, but I don't think that's been the case for us.
Chris, there's we've gotten a lot of questions from MLSs and members about what information can they put out to consumers to help them stay up to date with local market conditions, right? There's a lot of information in the news about what real estate is doing or isn't doing nationally, but as with real estate, everything's local, and members want that local insight. Is there anything that you're finding that you either had access to but hadn't been using from the MLS in the past, or something that you wish you had more access to that could help you and your agents in communicating with consumers?
So something that we weren't familiar with that I've since learned, because we've been on lots of different trainings with different realtors across the country, is Showing Time has the ability to give these market reports similar to the MLS, but it's based off of actual showing data. So we have been utilizing that now, and that's something that going forward we'll continue to utilize to our clients' best interest. And then also on the flip side, we were already using Zoom and different things to do virtual trainings, but we've become a lot better at that now. And we're allowing agents to do different things with our, master company account that they wouldn't have had access to do before, which is pretty cool too. Like virtual home buyer seminars and things like that.
Perfect. I'm going to take a quick moment to glance at the questions. And just to remind everyone, if you have questions now or throughout the webinar, please send those through the Q&A function. And we'll get those answered for you as we go along here or towards the end.
If you want, Renee, I can read this question.
Sure.
Wondering how everyone is doing with implementing NAR Clear Cooperation Policy 8.0. We're getting ready and communicating with the members and getting a lot of pushback that there is an unfair advantage to large brokerage firms. Also, that now is not the right time to stay at home and shelter in place orders in place. In other words, given what's going on with shelter at home, that there's an opinion that it's not the right time to implement this policy. And I'm happy to respond to that too, Renee. So The MLS Technology and Emerging Issues Advisory Board did talk about the current situation that we're in with the pandemic and whether it made sense to delay implementation. As most, if not everyone knows, the implementation deadline is May 1. After a thorough discussion of that and the support that this policy change was given in November, and if you remember, it was a 91% support rate from the board of directors and a lot of support too from the committee and outside of those groups. The advisory board saw fit that this is still an important issue. And our topic's about communication, so this kind of fits right in that, right? And it's an important issue to the buying and selling public, and we need to ensure that the brokerage community and sellers and buyers are best served. And the basis behind the policy is, given that a property is publicly marketed, meaning that there isn't an issue of privacy concerns. This isn't a listing that the listing broker is trying to sell itself, that they are either promoting it publicly in one fashion or not, by sharing it with other brokerage firms or doing some limited exposure in the marketplace. That the rationale behind that is, if you're going to expose it to the marketplace and there aren't privacy concerns, that it's in the best interest of the client to share that information in the MLS. Now, important to note, if it's shared in the MLS, that doesn't mean that you have to check all the boxes and flip all the switches to put it on IDX and other displays. You still control that, but you have to inform the other brokers in your marketplace about those listings, that they shouldn't have to hunt for that property information. And given our specific situation that we have right now, the public should be able to have ready access to the available properties for sale. So there still is a strong support and a strong belief that this is the right course of action to take. And there are a lot of MLSs that have already implemented it in advance of the deadline, and they're seeing real positive results from that. I read today where an MLS had hundreds of off MLS listings that is now down to a handful of listings. And think of the benefits of that to the brokerage community and to potential purchasers of those properties. So still an important issue. There is a learning curve, so communication, again, key. I know there are MLSs that are doing webinars and other remote educational offerings about clear cooperation and what it means. So we encourage you to do that. If you're looking for additional assistance from Renee, myself, Lee, Charlie Lee, we're happy to do that. Just reach out to us.
Perfect. Thank you, Rodney. Krista, we talk about, Rodney just gave us a great update and recap right on the clear cooperation policy, and that brings me over to how have things really impacted your day-to-day in the brokerage side in terms of relying on that data, listing data, additional data, or other changes that you're getting from the MLS? Are you finding a greater need to lean on the MLS and looking for additional changes? Tell me about that relationship right now and what you're seeing in your area.
Yeah, so I think that, part of our market is military, because we are nicknamed Military City USA. So part of the listings that would have normally flooded the market in the last couple months were halted due to PCS orders being stopped. So moving forward, now that they're starting to open those back up again for July, I think that we were able to capitalize on some of the things that our MLS did change. They listened to the brokers that they did get feedback from, and they were able to update our MLS photos from 25 to 50 photos. So we are able to add, extra pictures of floor plans or surveys or extra things in those that don't necessarily in the additional disclosures get synced with all the IDXs. So I think that that's really great for the consumer. And then also additionally Matterport. So we were already pretty big into video at our brokerage, but I have seen, we have also started utilizing Matterport, and a lot of other brokers in our area are now stepping up their video game, which I think is always great for the consumer. In addition to, virtual home tours and virtual open houses, a lot of things that we've made changes to. Our day-to-day is not in our office with our agents. So a lot of things, like our fellowship, have to come from these type of virtual settings. So that has changed a little bit. I think that it's easy for people to just fit it in now because we don't have to get in the car and drive far or anywhere or inconvenience ourselves. So doing weekly huddles with our team and our company is important, but then also providing those trainings to them because they're still looking for answers and still trying to figure out how do they conduct business right now and what is okay and what's not okay for them to do.
Great, thank you. Will, making some of those changes that Krista mentioned, the ability to upload additional photographs, expanding character count on property description fields, for example, simple changes, but oftentimes, there's a delay, right? It's hundreds of MLS clients for the vendors, creates a pretty lengthy pipeline and turnaround time. What's your experience been? What's the experience that you've encountered in adding new features like that, in this pandemic world? Is that still a long turnaround time, or what's that lead time like?
Yeah, I mean, it does take, it always sounds simpler than it is. And this, I think we all kind of learn that the more we dig into the MLS world, because there are so many, boxes to check and get it right. And there are so many touch points that a little change can really affect down the line. So obviously we rely heavily on the vendor, and credit to the vendors we work with. They've been as on call as ever in terms of delivering these types of updates and working with us to, be flexible for what our agents and members need. And what we did, that's amazing to hear that Sabor did that, just little things like that, because that is, it does make a huge difference. Now, from the staff side, there probably was more hoops to jump through than it was on the outside looking in, but it's absolutely worth it to give that more valuable end result. And so we did little things like allowing URLs to be in our agent and public remarks. We usually have just a no URL policy because we have specific fields for virtual and video tours. But pretty immediately, and to their credit, we were saying, hey, you really should use this technology. It's here. It's the safe way to show a home. And they're like, well, we want more exposure of that. And we're like, absolutely, that is completely a fair ask. So CoreLogic, we use Matrix, and Listing Data Checker, we said, hey, pause this rule that says URLs. And so it's being in the client portal, it's sending to these sites. Granted, those sites may have their own URL, policies to follow, but we wanted to hear what we could do. And so while it does, it can be anywhere from a morning to an afternoon timeline, or, a business week in the sense of Monday through maybe Wednesday or Thursday, it's there. But even when we're not able to deliver it and someone's like, this is a high priority, the fact that we're willing to listen and we say we actually are working on that, please stay tuned to the message of the day for an update about this being an option, really seems to hit. And I think it's something that is mutually beneficial because we improve our system. And again, just like alluded to earlier, there might be some things that we kind of look at and put in place here, and we need to be ready for the next thing that hits and make sure we have these flexible development timelines or whatever that looks like, well documented and in place to where nobody was involved the first time could pick it back up the next time and make sure we're continuing to deliver that value.
Great. Well, you have at the association, you have access to and the staffing there, right, to receive all the information of what's going on at the local government level, state level, and federal, right, and even the communications that we send out to members and to associations and MLSs. What role do you think, or do you see the MLS and the brokers playing and working together and one, translating all the information that's coming out to you guys and putting that in a message that brokers and or members can take and use and share with their consumers? What's that look like at your association?
Well, I'm on the outside looking in on that one, which makes me very thankful for the role I'm in, because that stuff is so impressive that the team we have and, from the national, state, and local level are able to filter that message down to really a paragraph or two, sometimes a sentence or two. But at least from my perspective, we're, if nothing else, a sounding board. Like, does this make sense? And, the realtors know more about the stuff in a lot of terms and what some of those changes may be, but it's, the staff is an audience as well for us. And so we have to understand the change as we're putting it out. And that's kind of something I'll touch on later, perhaps, of like something that could have improved, of just making sure we were as proactive with staff, because that we're all talking to members in a different way and different audiences, and so we need to make sure that if there's an update from the GA side, the government affairs side, that we're well versed on what that is. And so part of that is improved from being involved in the beginning and saying, hey, here's the latest update in just all its glory. Give us a couple hours. We're going to come back with an update. Ask your questions in the meantime. And that team has been absolutely amazing to work with, to be open to, in my case, really dumb questions to ask, because I don't know quite as much. So, and they break it down, and it helps get that message in the right place, I think.
Great. Charlie, did you saw your
Yeah,
mute there?
I didn't know if you saw that. So. Yeah. I just a question that came to my mind is just as we're now 4 weeks or more into this, and this is the first week we're 6 weeks. Yeah, everything is all blurred together. I woke up today thinking it was Friday. So, I'm just wondering, I get the sense that maybe people are kind of feeling like they're getting a little bit of a hang of, how to manage through the pandemic. And I'm wondering if that's something that you guys are feeling, or how do you ensure that you stay on top of things? Because, leading up to this point, everything was just so quickly changing, and it still is changing. But, I'm just wondering, do you feel like you've got a working strategy and sticking to it? Or how do you consider when to make changes to it and identify things where maybe you're not addressing them sufficiently, or know that, these are the things that you are doing well? So just wanting to hear how each of you guys are handling that.
From our standpoint, I think the first thing is, just being very flexible. We have to understand that some clients are experiencing fear and concern that other clients aren't sharing. First, I guess I should premise that everything is different across the country. And so we have just preached to our agents, it's the best thing that they can do for their clients and the consumer is just put out facts and use the data that the MLSs and they're gathering, because that's the best way to let the consumer understand what's actually happening in the market. And then on the flip side, also just making sure that you put out a positive message. So whatever direction we're giving them, whether that's, showing instructions to wear gloves and wipe things down, or, we're asking our sellers to leave the lights on, we're just making sure that we have clear, concise conversations with people. And that sometimes means picking up the phone and not texting or emailing or using a Facebook post, because that's the best way to know that people are actually understanding what we're asking of them moving forward, because it is different for everyone across the board.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that flexibility. I mean, that's critical at a time like this where we truly don't know a day-to-day situation. And to Charlie's point, it was back-to-back days, messages for weeks and weeks, but it's been consistent, in terms of this being people being used to it. And I think, but the tide is starting to turn. It's like, well, when can we kind of get back to how it was? And, that's ultimately not for us to decide to an extent. What we can do is, once we start hearing that and leaning on the experts that we are connected to and that we know from many different levels, have a plan in place and starting to put that together to say, here is what we're going to do. And I think we're going to see across a lot of industries, including ours, and speaking from really just the MLS association side, kind of a phased approach to what we bring back, such as, having people at our building to sell a lockbox. That's something that's unfortunately we haven't been able to do for the safety of this, but it's something that, we need to be ready for and get back to it. But I think we realistically expect it can't go from 0 to 60 in one day. It really has to go 5 to 10 miles per hour to get back to something that is comfortable for all of the people who are touching a real estate transaction from our side of things.
And I think I'd have to add to that too, because Governor Abbott has, set some of these procedures in order to start opening things back up slowly and cautiously. We have decided that we'll open up our brokerage, but if you feel like we don't have multiple staff in each office, so it's okay to have one person there, but we aren't going to require our staff to come back to work. If they'd like to continue working from home, that's something that, we're absolutely willing to accommodate, because we understand that everything is different for everyone. So depending on who they live with or any type of other situation, they may not want to come back right away. And that's that's something that we're willing to accommodate because we understand that it's a process, but also we need to have that space for our agents when they need to be able to safely meet with the client or to safely do a closing because they can't get into a title office. I mean, there are definitely ways to practice caution while we're doing this. And I think that that's our biggest task with our agents, is just to direct them into providing the most caution while moving forward.
Great, thank you. Rodney, did you, were there a couple of other questions that came in?
Yeah, I have a comment, and then I have another question to address to the group. So I think it relates to what Kristen said and what Will said earlier, and we all talk about getting back to normal. I don't know if we ever get back to the same place we were, do we? I mean, based on this experience and based on the level of comfort that remote participation in meetings and just that added ability to communicate with people on a more widely accepted platform now, that there's real benefits here after the dust all settles from this, as far as how MLSs interact with their brokerage community and how brokers interact with their clients and customers. I'd love to hear more from either of you in response to that.
Yeah, I think that we've already thought about a couple of things. Virtual open houses are phenomenal and a safe way for female agents to, or male agents to host an open house. I mean, that's just one thing that I think has been, at the beginning of this a few weeks ago, there was an issue in San Antonio with a realtor when she was closing up from an open house. And I think that has changed a lot of things and will continue to change for the good. I also think that, adapting to whatever needs our clients, have is important. And so in San Antonio, a lot of agents probably weren't familiar with virtual tours, but we have a ton of military PCS orders going on all the time. And so I had done multiple deals through my cell phone and FaceTime before, but I think that it's really allowed agents to force them, actually, I guess not allowed, but force them out of their comfort level and to get familiar with things. And even agents that maybe didn't want to learn DocuSign before and now have no real option. And also at the same time, we're saving a lot of time from driving. So there will be so many different changes, I think, on the commercial side of how businesses run, because they're going to need less workspace and maybe more communal space, not individual space, but communal space.
Yeah, that's completely true. I can't remember the last time I had an actual just phone call. Everybody's all about video chatting, and it's helped me get over my fear of just looking at myself in the camera and talking among folks. But for our members, I hope that they are embracing trying a few new things, if called out of necessity for what it is, but experimenting with this and seeing what can be applied to the new norm that we'll get to. We hear that phrase all the time now with good reason, but there are many things that can be taken away. And just from our side of services, that can be, we have Saturday service now for limited hours for walk-in services, but again, that what if we made it a virtual desk and no walk-in, but people could work from home and still provide this level of comfort, or really make a virtual walk-in a normal thing. And so they just ping us, create an appointment time, and then we reach out via video chat. And I would imagine that a lot of realtors, just like I am with my personal inner circle, I'm talking with folks that I probably wouldn't have otherwise spoken to. So kind of getting that comfort level of having these truly, I heard one, it's social distancing, of course, the phrase, but it's more of physical distancing, because socializing is still happening, and it should happen because we need that, probably now more than ever. So to that comment and that point, I mean, we'll see it across the board, things change. And I do truly hope the everlasting optimist in me that it's for the better, and these things push the industry forward across the board.
It's funny you bring up the connection, right? We're all isolated in our homes, and we kind of starve for that added enhanced connection of a video chat. Just this morning, I was scheduling a phone call, and I thought to myself, what am I doing? It shouldn't be a phone call.
Yeah.
I have an opportunity to see the person and interact with them, and there's a benefit there for everybody. So great comment. One of the questions that we have in the Q&A is, could you guys talk a little bit about whether you're allowing others to, how you're dealing with branded virtual tours? In our last MLS hour, we talked about how MLSs have to be nimble and address, broker needs. And some of the responses to that was allowing, URLs in public comments or allowing virtual tours that were branded, right? And when we say branded, we mean there's some identifier of the listing firm. And it seems to me that those steps normally aren't taken. Maybe in some markets they are, but I think it's few and far between if it is. But those steps are being taken now just to try and be nimble and give brokers that added benefit of a virtual tour, even if it is branded. So what is your approach to that? And how do you in your markets, respective markets, allow branded tours?
Speaking from our side, we do allow branded tours, both virtual and video. So they're kind of, could be the same thing depending on how you look at that tour. But we have those fields separated to keep that branded exposure there outside of the MLS on these various syndication channels they may choose to send to. And then within the MLS, keep it non-branded to the assumption being if a client is seeing it, they're working with the agent already and keep that communication there. But in terms of the nimble, I mean, we were originally like, we'll allow non-branded URLs in the remarks for these tours. And it's like, well, let's be realistic here. Let's do what's right for this added value and exposure. And let's just say, if you have a tour, whether it's branded or non-branded, just put it in there and we're going to allow it for the time being. And of course we'll look at adjusting that, but that seemed to have worked for us. And it's, if there's just some clarification on what branded and non-branded means, pretty consistent question, which is fair. So we just address that as it pops up, but it seems to be working for our market.
So I guess we're two of few then, because we also, our virtual tour link was allowed to be branded prior to this. So in the same assumption that if you're receiving the MLS listing, you're getting that from somebody you're working with, a client is getting that from an agent. So we already allowed that, but we didn't adapt the virtual tours in our public comments. I'm sure that we could. They would actually make a notice. Now that we have 4,000 characters, we have the ability to do that. But yeah, I think that I understand, but I also think that, hopefully there's some leeway with this whole everybody's figuring this out as we go type situation.
And I think there's a practical point in there too. Who the listing broker isn't a secret anymore, right? There's strong attribution, whether it's through IDX or other displays. And you clearly can still, through local policy, have a provision that prohibits branding. But like Will said, in the current environment, you might want to look at that and see where the best interests in serving your membership are, and in turn, the best interests in serving the buying and selling public. I have Elizabeth Breen pointing out that what we are seeing is members who are uploading tours through YouTube channel that is branded. And then she's also pointing out that Facebook Live is being used and that's clearly branded as well.
Yeah, that's a trickier one in the sense that, I mean, that is, if it's coming from an agent Facebook page, that's branded to the agent, I mean, most likely. But we do allow within our branded scope for it to be hosted on the office's YouTube channel. So we kind of think of it as like, this listing is presented by this office's YouTube channel. In this case, this is who that listing is under. So we see it there. And we have had some back and forth about what I didn't think it was branded. It's like, well, your name's on this and that's not the name of the office. So that's kind of just explaining that rule. And they tend to work around that, whether creating a YouTube channel that's new or with that. But yeah, I can understand the Facebook one as well. And that's, for us at least, we have that non-branded field, or excuse me, the branded field that would be the most appropriate to put in. But for example, if it was more of a live situation, like a live stream, virtual open house type thing, that's, that would be a perfect place for a Facebook Live type video. And, we don't have branded or non-branded rules around that specific use.
Yeah, and the same thing, we're allowed to post ours on YouTube as long as it is the brokerage's account. And then that's the link we put in our virtual tour box.
Charlie, I'll come over to you in just a second. But so, Rodney, right, there's no national policy, national MLS policy on point that either requires or prohibits branding within media or virtual tours. So that's all left to local MLSs and associations.
Exactly on point, Renee. This isn't an issue. This isn't an issue of protecting the brokerage community or somehow insulating the MLS from some type of business practice. This is a local policy that the brokers in a particular community can look at and determine how they want to address virtual tours and whether they can or can't be branded.
And that said, I think Will and Krista have pointed out, right, that it's not a one or nothing option, right? The MLS can certainly implement a branded virtual tour field and an unbranded virtual tour field for different use case scenarios. So, for example, that as Will touched on, unbranded field for inclusion in client portals within the MLS platform, and member to consumer or client communications, and then still retain a separate field fully branded for syndication sites, IDX, or whatever the case may be. Charlie, what considerations should members be thinking about, or maybe even MLSs as they're walking through, especially those that haven't adopted these fields yet, and ensuring that they're not, potentially interfering with client relationships, allowing branding, or is there anything that they should think through in that regard?
Yeah, I think just in terms of just the marketing in general, I think you want to be sure that you're being consistent with the policies and the rules that you're subject to. And in terms of just marketing overall, you want to be sure that you're being accurate and, providing a truthful representation in what you're doing. But I am going to take this as my cue for my legal sermon, Renee. So I'm going to get into that. And so, as we were just talking about this, and, we're navigating through some uncertain times, and people are being forced to be creative and to think of different ways to handle things. I was just thinking, I was watching a YouTube video where I'm looking to cut my hair, and I'm worried because I'm going to have to cross that bridge. And so I'm just like, okay, I've got to do this. And in order to prep for that, I'm watching as many YouTube videos as possible, just so that when that moment arrives, I think I'll know what I'm doing. So I think that kind of goes into the first thing here. It's just, I think brokers need to know what they're doing as they're trying different things, as they're trying to tackle new things. And this is important in terms of, if you're using new technology, be sure that you know what you're doing, how to use it, and then it can provide what you intended for it to provide. So if you're, doing a virtual showing or doing a virtual open house, the brokers should know the technology, the features, because your clients are going to be dependent on that. And then in terms of, just making sure that you have the necessary legal rights in terms of, what that technology is going to produce with regards to intellectual property, right? So I was just listening to someone tell me the other, in another meeting, and they were saying that they've had sellers they will take the photographs or do the video recordings, and then they will actually send that to the broker, and the broker will then send that to the photographer or a professional, and then they will enhance it and brush that up. And so now you've got 3 different people or 3 parties involved just in producing that. And so in some way, the intellectual property rights are going to be affected as people are touching it. So make sure that in the end that you have the necessary legal rights and permissions to be able to use it as you're promoting the property itself. Second is just communicating correctly, right? As realtors, you have to be honest and truthful in your communications. Be sure to present a true picture. If you're engaging in any sort of virtual staging, avoid exaggerations. Make sure that you do provide disclosures with regards to virtual stagings. Don't erase any sort of fixtures or things, or don't add a driveway or anything to the photographs, because right now people are limited. My understanding is that people are looking to buy homes, and some people are buying homes sight unseen. And so these things will come to a head because they're going to be more reliant on some of these services and representations that will be provided, versus where people normally could walk into the house and see for themselves. And then lastly, just be sure to act, know the fundamentals, and act in the client's best interest and with the standards of practice and competence. Right now, as a realtor, you are not just a broker, you are subject to the code of ethics. And so this is a great time for that to be promoted in the communications, that, you know, as a realtor, you stand out versus a non-realtor broker. And so, and then, you know, what that means, and, you know, the type of competence that you will be providing in the level of services, and also just being sure that, you know, you're acting in the client's best interest, the client understands what that you can provide them, especially in line with the state executive order. So, you know, a client may want to do certain things that you may not be able to do, but maybe there's different ways that you can perform those services. And then, you know, with everything else, with COVID-19 and just how to go about ensuring that health and safety is being maintained and taken care of. So that ends my sermon.
That's perfect. Thank you, Charlie. I always look forward to the Charlie Lee sermons. So as we start to wind down here, you know, a lot of great information has been shared. And Krista, I'll start with you. And by the way, for those of you that might have some last couple questions, please feel free to send those over now as we'll start to wrap up here. But Krista, any last piece of advice or recommendations for those that are thinking about making changes to the platform? Anything that you're seeing from the brokerage side of maybe a special need or demand for information or certain type of information? Maybe some pointers on what folks can be thinking about on working together between the MLSs and the brokers to help navigate the current market conditions.
Yeah, I think that, moving forward, I think communication between the association, MLS, and the brokerages, that's, going to be number one, because as soon as this unraveled, that was the first thing we needed to do, was get in communication with everybody. I liked that, something that Will said y'all are doing over there in ABOR is rolling out this information weekly for the brokerages, the data. And I think that, if anything, that's probably one of the best ways to get in front of things before we have an issue with anything, especially as times are changing. So I think that also, if I could just give one piece of advice to any realtor, it would probably be just to stick to facts, stay away from shaming your fellow realtors, because we don't understand each other's situations if we're not seeing things, seeing everything. So I think that, one of the things that I've learned the most is that the best thing we can do is just stay positive and provide support. So if there's some way that somebody's lashing out at somebody, it's probably because they're looking for some piece of information or guidance that they're not getting somewhere else. And just providing positive support can do a lot for people right now.
Great, thank you. And Will, same from your perspective on the MLS side, any recommendations or suggestions on how members can communicate their needs and their challenges to the MLS so that you can work collaboratively and finding solutions together?
Absolutely. I mean, the staff is here to listen and learn and help. And, speaking for our board of directors, our board of directors is as well. And we have a specific email that we say, hey, please contact the board. It's a shared email. Share your ideas, concerns, questions, whether through us on the staff level, calls, anything like that, social media posts, tagging us. There are a number of routes to get a hold of us, and we are paying attention to every single one of them. So that's, and that's never going to change. That's going to be there, but particularly now, and just let us know what you need. I mean, we've on the communication side, it's, one of the positives in all this is it really has let us know what we really should be communicating about, because we are seeing the value, and it's clear as day to us is what needs to be sent, and that's updates on when this was unfolding, and now it's the consistent touch points on how the market's looking data wise. Tell the story, like Chris said, stick to the facts, and let that interpretation go from there. But it's we've been leaning heavily into more engagement on our side of things, and I think that's been shared across all association levels. And we really mean it when we say we want to hear what's going on, because we can make some adjustments potentially and try to do the best we can. Perfect.
Thank you, Will. Rodney, a couple more questions?
I got one question, a comment, then a question. I always have a comment, don't I? So communication always just so vitally important, right? Understanding your channels, understanding your audience, but in times of uncertainty like this, even more so. And at the same time, huge opportunities for the MLS to show its value, for the brokerage community to show its value. So hats off to Will and Krista for everything you guys are doing in your local markets. And for everybody else who's on the call, look for those opportunities and take advantage of them, right? Question that we have is pointing out that, you know, different states have different orders when it comes to shelter in place. And in California, owner-occupied homes are to only be shown virtually. However, the MLS is still seeing some agents violating that order. Does the MLS have an obligation to keep or remove showing instructions for owner-occupied homes? Is anyone else running into this issue? And if somebody else is running into the issue, please just type your comments into the chat box and we'll share them, or you can give them to everybody in the group as well. I can tell you that there's no national policy on this. Maybe Charlie has some comments in regard to it. I've heard advice say that the MLS shouldn't be enforcing a state order. At the same time, the MLS can take steps to either suspend certain fields where, not suspend them, but repurpose certain fields where you would normally put in property inspection information and maybe turn that into a field for virtual hosting. And Charlie, do you have anything else you'd want to add to that from a legal perspective as far as the MLS fining somebody for violating an order? Obviously, we'd want the practitioners to comply with those orders, but is there a role for the MLS to play as far as trying to sanction someone for doing that?
No, not, and you're right, Rodney. It's not the MLS's place to enforce the state order. That's the government's job, you know, just for obvious reasons. If there's a policy that's going to be applicable, then that would provide some sort of basis, you know, and then the practical side of things is that if you don't have that field made available, then that's the way that you would go about precluding it. But if it is available and they're doing it, then really, you know, they're taking the risk on themselves to, you know, go against the state order. But for the MLS, I think, you know, it's unfortunate that that's happening, but they don't need to do anything there.
And then I have somebody adding to that comment, and that is they point out it's Sharon Kerrigan, and she points out that she's a tourist destination. She's in a market, it's a tourist destination, and there is a no travel order in her market, but people are still driving up and they're viewing properties, and leave it to the public, right? We have members of the public who are contacting every broker they can until they'll find somebody who's willing to show them that property. Obviously, again, follow those orders, and communication here is important to stress to your agents and your brokerage community that there's a point to those orders and they should be complying with them, and what it means by complying with them. So I don't know if Will or Kristen have experience with that, but would love to hear it.
We were fortunate, even though we did have a shelter in place, we were an essential business, but we did adapt a lot of our showings. So as many showings as possible that could be virtual, that's what we did. We've changed some of our strategies and that we're trying to allow our, I think our MLS actually, our showing time, the service that we use to schedule showings, adapted it first, and they made a link, an option for it to be a virtual tour. And speaking to Charlie, they did actually, within that, it does allow our agents to take some of the liability off of them, because they are now, you know, they're notified, the seller is notified that this is a virtual tour, and so their property will be filmed. But I think that, you know, it's the best you can do is guide people to follow the rules, and there will always be people that don't follow the rules. Fortunately, that wasn't something, you know, we had the ability to stay home if you didn't want to show, but also the ability to take precaution. And that was something I was able to do in the beginning, was just alleviate some of my buyers' concerns and be the one that touched everything by using gloves and opening everything myself with gloves, and nobody else had to touch anything, and everybody else could wear their mask. And obviously no children came, and you know, one adult, maybe two at the most. And then we limited homes. So instead of seeing, you know, 10 to 12, we saw 3, 2 of which were vacant. So we were fortunate. And then at the end of that, I still took the time to wipe everything down, because I just felt like that was the most cautious way I could handle that. And also then I could say to our agents that that's how we're handling and practicing, trying to be as cautious as possible as well.
Yeah, we just continue to preach that caution, particularly for the occupied homes, which is obviously kind of the more, where the questions pop up in that arena. The unoccupied homes, a little bit steadier, and that's still use the utmost caution, but there's less people involved truly, so it makes that process a little bit easier. So we haven't heard much of that, and I can understand that struggle of, if I don't do it, will somebody else take my business in that? And, from our side of things, we try to enforce what we think is right in the sense of strongly discouraging, showing that, and not even showing them in person really. So it's not discouraging something, but encouraging something else that we think can be a satisfactory option, such as a virtual quick recording of the property.
And, I have friends in other markets that are doing some totally different things. Like I think it's in Georgia, they're allowing people to do virtual FaceTimes from the seller to the listing agent while they're actually bringing in the buyer and the buyer's agent at the same time. So instead of it just being somebody else going into their property, all of the agents and the parties are present, and, they're still able to view homes to the best of the ability virtually.
That's cool.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Again, lots of great information. Looks like we also answered all the questions that came in. So sounds like a good time to go ahead and wrap it up here. We'll finish it on time here. Krista, Will, thank you so much for your time and the wonderful responses. And for those of you that attended, if you have any follow-up questions or need help with anything, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We're all here available at to help you and your associations and MLSs as well. And again, keep an eye out for our next installment of the MLS Hour. We'll post that on it. Charlie, did you have one?
Oh, yeah. Did we also want to encourage people to let us know if there are any particular topics that they'd like us to tackle in any future webinars?
Yeah, great point. Yeah, thank you for that, Charlie. Yeah, if there's any specific areas that you would like us to focus on or touch on, or guests that you think would be great for the MLS Hour, please let us know. We're putting these on for all the great information that we're able to get from our guests, but also to help you. So please feel free to reach out to us, give us suggestions on the topics or speakers that you'd like for us to present to you on the MLS Hour, and we'll get those lined up for you guys. Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good one. Stay safe out there.
Bye.